Are we ready to do a podcast?
Yes, we are.
Here, okay, there we go. Are we really ready to do a podcast?
Yeah.
You sure about that?
No.
Oh, geez. This is gonna be interesting. It's gonna be fun. All right. Hello and welcome to Learning the Law, a podcast about all things legal with a focus on current events where we try to teach you things in 1 hour. I don't know why I'm saying that so fast. My name is Ashley, aka Phoenix Nymphy, and my co-host, who is the man of the hour and the person who doesn't talk that fast, is my husband, Ron.
Hello.
This podcast is purely educational and should not be taken as legal advice. This podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship, and this podcast is based on our interpretation of relevant law, mostly his. Any opinions, mostly mine, expressed are the opinions of the individual making them and do not reflect the opinions of any firm, company, or other individuals. Ron is a licensed practicing attorney in the state of California.
Yes, I am. Oh, and have been so since September 15th in 1999.
Yeah, I mean, you can't not say it at this point. We're 16 episodes in. You can't not say it.
I know. It was last century, though.
Anyway, aside from the fact that you're old, I'm excited. So this is our first time doing a mini series. So we're actually doing a mini series for all of you, and we are going to go in depth about the First Amendment. This whole mini series is only the First Amendment, and I'm really excited because we're really going to get in depth about what the First Amendment actually is. So welcome to mini series part 1 of our deep dive into the First Amendment. If you are just joining us, welcome. If you are coming back, welcome back. And thank you, everybody, for supporting this podcast. Remember, we do stream it live here on Twitch, but it's available in audio format everywhere else within 24 hours because Twitch rules and regulations and all of that stuff. So last week we did not have a podcast because last week was my birthday, and then Ron also started his new job on last Tuesday, and there was just so much going on, and my birthday was Wednesday, so we just figured it would be better just to kind of cancel it for last week, and then we would start back up this week.
Yeah.
So
not only did I start my job, I also ended my previous job.
Yeah, there was a lot going on last week. His 2-week notice was up. And then he started the new job. And then, so we are back with a fun little mini series. At least I'm having fun because I'm learning. I hope you all are enjoying it as well. So we did learn that due to his new firm, we cannot discuss, we can't name it, we can't discuss it.
Everything is just me.
Yes. So we want to emphasize that this doesn't, not that it ever reflected the opinions of any firm, but we want to make sure to emphasize that this is not, this does not reflect any firm. And we want to clear that up because, after going through orientation, we've learned, the social media presence is important, obviously, and we just want to continue with what we have been doing here on the podcast, and let you all know that even though he is at a new firm, we still will not be discussing who his firm is. We didn't discuss his old firm, all of that stuff. So I think that about wraps up all of the updates. So yeah, what you got? Let's go.
Well, if you recall, 2 weeks ago, we did a podcast on the Supreme Court and what was coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And
you are 2 for 2 so far.
couple of rulings came in. One was on the ACA and whether or not it was constitutional. And we predicted that the Supreme Court would keep it alive, and the Supreme Court did, essentially saying that Texas, you have no standing to even bring this case anymore because you weren't damaged.
Yeah. I was not expecting that. I'm not going to lie. You're the one who predicted that. I didn't really have a prediction. I was like, I don't know. This could go either way. You were the one who was way more confident than me about that. And literally the reasoning behind it is because we removed the fact that you are required to, the tax penalty was removed. Therefore, you have no reason to argue that this needs to be removed based upon financial damages. And they also said, we're done with this. This should have been dismissed before. Stop bringing it to us. Like, they're kind of done going over the ACA issues. So I don't expect that to go to the Supreme Court again anytime soon.
Although I don't expect that the entities against the ACA are going to stop either.
No, I just expect the Supreme Court to, you know what I mean? Just to be like, we're not, no. So that was I was very happy with that. So the next one was
Bolton v. City of Philadelphia.
Yes, the parent adoption for same-sex couples.
Right. And the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Catholic Church, Bolton.
They upheld the religious freedom thing, right?
Right.
Then don't have a contract with the county. I understand the ruling on that, because if you open this up, you'll open it up. You do kind of open it up for more of an opportunity to, have the government oversee religious stuff, which is not something we want. But at the same time, you don't take a contract with a government entity. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's some obligation there to respect the government if you have a contract with it.
I would agree with you. Justices of the Supreme Court do not agree with us. But they did say that this ruling is tailored to the facts of this case, and that it doesn't set precedent for other cases.
So other cases could come up with that particular, with a similar situation. And so like if you were going up, you could not reference that particular case because it's not like Roe v. Wade, where it's a ground like the, okay.
And who knows, maybe the next case will be a religion that will only cater to same-sex couples.
I understand their reasoning. I just don't agree, and that's okay. And you can do that. That's the thing. You can understand and still not agree with your politician, with the things. And it's nuanced. It's more complicated than black and white, which is, what our politicians would have you think otherwise right now. If you're not for me, then you're against me. And that's not true. It's absolutely not true. So yeah, I'm excited to get into the First Amendment. And I will say this, as more Supreme Court rulings as the next two come down, we'll also update you on those rulings on the podcast, because we did talk about them. So I guess I'll read this out, and then I'll just kind of let you go from there and just ask my questions. How does that sound?
Sounds fine.
Okay, so what does the First Amendment actually say? So the First Amendment, this is what it actually states. It's very simple. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So, I mean, that right there is what the Supreme Court held up for the Catholic Adoption Agency. I mean,
right. And we're going to focus on the freedom of speech.
Yeah, but we are going to talk about the other stuff, correct?
That's why it's a mini-series.
Okay. We just wanted to focus on the freedom of speech today.
Right. Religion will be next.
That's definitely a hot button topic. Well, actually, this whole thing is, but yeah.
The speech right now is a hot button topic. There's a bunch of legislatures across the country trying to prohibit protests.
Yes. Well, I mean, we did do the podcast, the anti-First Amendment laws, which addressed that. That was a few episodes ago. And we got a lot of response out of that episode. So this is kind of a follow-up due to response, to kind of go into depth more on what that actually means. So I'm sorry.
And the reason I wanted to do speech first was there's a lot of people that don't understand exactly what that means.
Right.
And I will say that a freedom of speech is not freedom of consequences.
Right. Again, and that kind of goes into cancel culture, which is a huge thing that the GOP is really bringing up constantly, is everything's getting canceled. And the thing is, that's not what that is. These people have gone so long being able to say whatever they want without having any consequences. And now the consequences are catching up to them. And that's why they're getting quote unquote canceled. You're not getting canceled because people aren't canceling you because you said something inappropriate once. You're getting canceled because you said or did inappropriate things for a long time and never changed.
Right.
And the thing is, say you do have consequences and something happens and you go, okay, all right. I will step back and I will go educate myself, do better. Doesn't mean you can't come back. Right. Nobody's blacklisting you. You're blacklisting yourself by saying you're never coming back. No. Just respect people and learn where you did wrong and accept your mistakes. Nobody's perfect.
The first question that you get reading the First Amendment should be, it says Congress shall make no law.
Yes.
So why can't the state legislature make laws? Why can't your local government make a law restricting your speech?
I mean, based off of that, they should be able to.
Because the Supreme Court, throughout the history of the Constitution, has held that the speakers are protected against all government agencies and officials, federal, state, local, legislative, executive, or judicial. Doesn't matter. If there's government action, no one can make a law restricting speech.
So even though it says Congress shall make no law, it actually means government.
Right. That's how the Supreme Court has interpreted it for 2 centuries.
Okay. Is there any reason why they would change that interpretation?
There's no reason that they should change that interpretation. No.
So these laws right now that these states are making, what are some of these laws that the states are making right now? That mostly it's the peaceably assembling stuff, but like, what are some examples of the freedom of speech laws?
Let's see. 8 states have passed anti-protest laws.
Right. Which we have addressed that, but we're not really here to talk about those yet.
Right. But it's the protests where you're going to be speaking.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see. Okay. So that would then, we'll use civil rights as an example. It would be like stopping Jesse Jackson, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X from being able to speak.
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
So that's the effect of the anti-protest laws. It's on the surface, they want law, order. They don't want any violence. But the effect of it is to curtail people's speech.
But I mean, on the surface, that's kind of BS, right? Because I've been to protests before. I've been to walks before. They don't get violent unless you have another entity bringing in the violence. In my experience, I haven't been to
Generally speaking, that's true.
I haven't been to a whole lot, but what I have, witnessed and what I've been to, like, I wasn't there when the violence started happening, but there was violence at one of the walks that I did in Atlanta, my very first one. At the end of the night, when the cops were trying to, remember the cops pulled the guy out of the car, the girl and the guy out of the car, because they were trying to drive away or, go home, essentially. I don't remember why. I don't remember the full details of it. I just remember they were pulling them out, and it turned out to be no reason to be doing that. That's kind of when it turns violent. But up until then, it was very peaceful. Yeah, it was disruptive, but that's the point of protests. That's the point of walks, is to disrupt so people will take notice. Like, that's what they do.
Right. As long as it's peaceful.
Right. So.
And we'll get into that later in the miniseries.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
That argument just doesn't seem like it feels like a straw man argument. Is what it feels like to me.
Yeah. So the big thing people should take out of this, which a lot of people just don't understand, is your freedom of speech does not apply to private employers, private colleges, private landowners. The First Amendment only restrains the government and government actions on your speech.
So, well, that kind of goes back to the high school, the girl who tweeted and complained about her high school for not making the cheerleading squad. I mean, is that a private, or because it's educational, that's government, right?
That was a public high school.
So that's a government entity.
Right.
That's why that went up to the Supreme Court, because that's
correct.
kind of it's definitely on that line. So
now, if it was a private high school, it would have, that lawsuit should have been dropped in the beginning. Should never gotten to the Supreme Court.
If it was private, because they have every right to do what they want.
Right.
Yeah. Now,
like a private employer. As much as I wanted to, I couldn't have gone into my previous firm and told the partner to go himself.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, what are we at? 27 minutes in? Okay, all right. Gotta beep that out. Thanks.
Okay. Now, and I use that as an example because I know you're going to beep it out. Twitch can totally stop you from saying that particular word, and I have no.
Can yes or can't no?
Can.
Yes,
they can.
Okay, so Twitch can stop us from being able to say that. They can ban us specifically for that if they want.
Yes.
Yeah. Because it's a private entity. It's not
correct.
Even if it was publicly shared, like, because it's Amazon or whatever, it still doesn't constitute under the government thing.
Right. Now, if Twitch did receive some government funding, then you could make the argument that they're an agent of the government and you have a freedom of speech on that platform.
Interesting. Okay.
And some of those cases win and some of those cases lose.
I'm out of tea and it makes me sad.
Because there's a lot of difference between being funded 100% by the government or 50% by the government and 1% by the government.
Right. So, and to me, that seems like very straightforward. You are a privately owned business, privately, even if it's publicly, like, even if it's publicly shared or whatever, like on the stock market, like Home Depot or Walmart or whatever, they can still, they have the right to do what they want with their within reason. But if you say something and it doesn't fit with what they expect of their employees, they can fire you, and you can try to fight it, but you're not going to win 90% of the time.
Because private employers are private employer. Right.
So my next question is then, how would say you do have a really bad employee, you do have a really bad store manager, and your store manager fires you for some BS reason, and it ends up causing you a lot of distress. Could you still sue, or could you still attempt? Would it be worth attempting? I guess it depends on the individual case.
Depends on the job, and it depends on the kind of damages you got.
Yeah.
Because as long as they give you a reason for termination, you can make a case for just about anything as it being unlawful. And you can sue on that.
So what constitutes speech? Like, what are, based off of the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, what constitutes freedom of speech? Because I think it's more than just speaking.
It is. It covers not only talking,
Right.
but writing, printing, publishing, broadcasting, using the internet. There's also what's called symbolic speech, displaying a flag, burning a flag, wearing an armband.
Hold up. You said burning a flag, but according to the Patriot Act, burning the flag is illegal.
I think that's been ruled on.
Oh, has it? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'd always, when I was in Girl Scouts, we were taught that if your flag ever, because, there's some weird flag rules that I'd find it weird. That stuff's so weird to me. The laws that we have made up for a piece of fabric. If it touches the ground, if it gets shredded, if it gets dirty, you don't throw it away, you burn it. And then the Patriot Act happened, and I'm like, hold up, then what are we supposed to do with it?
Exactly. Do you know that the proper way to dispose of a flag that gets dirty is to burn it?
Yeah. Yeah. But then that was stated, it was so I found that weird. So that's interesting that burning a flag is specifically in here. They probably got rid of that in the Patriot Act, which is a whole other thing that is just weird in and of itself.
There's a case back in 1990, which is the definitive case.
Okay.
Where Sean Eichmann was a defendant, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. If people have seen the movie, about the Chicago 8, I forget what the name of it was. William Kunstler, who was an attorney in that case, was also the attorney in this case. And the Supreme Court said that burning the flag is protected free speech.
Okay.
Now that pisses a lot of people off, and I can understand their feeling for that. But it is a political statement.
I think the only people that it frustrates are the people who are patriotic. It's, that's how you're supposed to. Anyway, all right, let's start this podcast. Let's get back to this podcast. Okay.
I was gonna say we started it.
Shut up. Okay, what constitutes speech? Okay, so press, publication, writing, artwork, because art is political. It's very political. So
there was an attempt about 20 years ago where the government that was funding the endowment for the arts was trying to stop a gallery showing of an artist by the name of Mapplethorpe.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't have my notes on that, but everyone can Google that. There were some pretty offensive pieces of artwork to certain people, and they didn't think the government should fund it. But as I recall, the funding went through anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah. The next year after that, the Congress did reduce the amount of funding to the endowment of the arts, but you couldn't say that it was just because of Mapplethorpe, because it was the entire funding. It wasn't just a condition put on the funding.
Right. Interesting. So this says, so we left with talking about burning flags, which is so weird. Like that whole the whole obsession that our country has with our flag has always been weird to me. Because it's a piece of fabric. Like it's so weird to me. Our obsession with the flag and what it means is weird. And burning crosses is on this list.
Yes.
The only people I know that burn crosses are the KKK.
Right.
And I don't know of any other group that burns crosses historically that have burned crosses. And the reason why they burn crosses is a very, very dark, racist, bigoted history.
Right. And yet they have the right to do it.
But not on people's lawns.
No.
Okay.
You can't go into a private piece of property that you don't have permission to use and do it.
But they can burn a cross in their own yard.
In their own yard, they can burn a cross on public lands.
So, like, if I were to go
like
to
Stone Mountain.
Stone Mountain is private. It's not a public. It's privately owned.
It wasn't in 1916.
Well, yeah, but they couldn't do that now. But like, if I were to go to Griffith Park, downtown LA, and burn a cross, that would be okay.
Yeah.
Could I also burn a flag at the park without any like permit or anything? Because you have to go get a permit to do a protest or peaceably assemble. But I mean, do you really have to get a permit? Or is that more of a, hey, here's a heads up? Is that more of like just a nicety to let them know what's going to happen?
It is a way for the government to regulate speech without them banning it. And we're going to get to that a little bit later.
Okay. But
generally, no, you do not need a permit to make a political statement.
Interesting.
On government property.
All right. So there's a lot that falls under speech.
Yes.
So the next thing you have here is restrictions on speech due to content.
Right.
So what does that mean?
That means, say you had one party in control of Congress. They cannot pass a law.
It's dinner time.
Yeah.
That's why he's barking.
I know. I'm going to restrict his speech and tell him not to bark. But the party in power can't pass a law saying, oh, no, you can't say anything about the party in power.
Isn't that what the Patriot Act did, though? Didn't the Patriot Act pass the Patriot Act was like, you can't talk crap about the president. You can't I feel like that's what a lot of this stuff, I feel like the Patriot Act actually.
The Patriot Act was about 800 pages of legislation that most of the people in Congress did not read. They just passed it. And many provisions of that act were deemed unconstitutional.
This is amazing to me how much sidebar, I think it's weird that when we try to pass something, we put so much into it. I know why. It's so that so that people won't actually read it. But like, wouldn't it just be easier to make it less? Like, scripts aren't even 800 pages. Like, come on.
Right. So my question is, who wrote that 800 pages?
Right.
Should look into that. It's I would tell you, but it's not the subject of our podcast.
Right.
But they can't pass a law where you, for example, you can't go out and criticize the Vietnam War at the time. You can't pass a law.
They can't pass a law stating that, is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't pass a law saying that you're either for or against, restricting speech on abortion, for or against.
Right. You can't go pass a law and say you can't assemble here. Like you can't speak here you can only speak here if you believe in this particular thing. So if you don't believe in this particular thing, they cannot pass a law stating that at all.
Right. And that's, you can't restrict speech based on its content, what it's about.
So
Because when you do that, the government is targeting the speaker's message.
yes, absolutely.
And generally, that violates the First Amendment.
So even if they don't. So let's go back to the January 6th insurrection.
Yes.
Had they been peaceful about that whole thing and not actually gone in and killed people, and been exceptionally violent, had they just stood on the steps and spoke, even though we don't agree with their message, and like the shaman got up and spoke, right? That would have been fine. And they couldn't have stopped that.
Generally, that is true. But they were also inciting a riot.
Right. But what I'm saying is remove the riot. Say they didn't incite the riot.
Okay,
and they
didn't say the same things.
They just got up and... okay. So had they gotten up and spoke like how they were still speaking, even though they weren't violent, they still could have gotten in trouble?
Yes.
Oh, even if they didn't take any action, they were just talking about, hey, we need to do this, we need to take this over, they could have still gotten in trouble.
Yes.
Okay.
There are generally 3 to 4 situations in which the government can restrict your speech.
Okay.
Number 1 is the old, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater.
Right.
You can get in trouble for that.
Okay.
You don't have the freedom of speech to do that. Likewise,
because it would incite chaos,
a panic,
and
people would die.
Yeah.
Just like you can't tell people to go to the Capitol and fight for their government in the way that they did.
I mean, if you want to fight for your government, you join the military.
Right. Or, you go through the courts, or you have a nonviolent protest. You don't break into the Capitol building.
So even if you don't, okay, is that, okay. So, all right. Hypotheticals, because you're on Twitter and you say, I want to, you're on Twitter and I think, I'm trying to come up with, okay. So say I'm on Twitter and I'm like, you know what? I'm in the Capitol and man, it would be great if somebody went in and just shot that place up. Or, man, Biden needs a bullet in the head, or Trump needs a bullet in the head.
Right. You can't do that.
even though you're not going to do it, that is still something the government can go, okay, let's bring you in and have a conversation.
Right. Still considered a threat.
Interesting. For the record, I don't condone that. Yeah, I don't like Trump. I don't like a lot of the GOP. I would never condone violence or death on anyone because that's just wrong. We're speaking in hypotheticals because there are people who do speak that way. There are people who do tweet out stuff like that, who post on Facebook and all kinds of stuff. So that's actually very, very important to know that, wow. Yeah, so what if you were very vague and you're like, I would not be sad if so-and-so died and it's a politician.
That is not a threat.
Okay.
I mean, it is a threat depending on who you're talking about.
It's a veiled threat, but also not a veiled threat. So that is actually kind of up for it is very subjective.
Yeah, that would be up for interpretation of what you meant. That would be up for a jury to decide if they decided to prosecute you on that. But generally, something like that, they're not going to prosecute you on. You may get a visit from the Secret Service.
Right. Like, I would advise you not to talk like that on the internet.
Right.
Because, I mean, a lot of the people who were part of the insurrection, I mean, the FBI, I mean, they're being very open about this, and they've shown, hey, here are, their Facebook post about this leading up to it. And I mean, they were saying Pence needs to die. Pelosi needs to die. These people, I mean, they were very, very vicious about it. So
that in the situation they were in, where they were breaking into the Capitol and saying people need to die and Pence needs to be hung.
Yeah.
That's not protected speech.
Because it's violence against somebody, specifically a government official.
You can't even pretend to threaten the president.
Right.
That will land you in jail very quickly.
I mean, you can, there's a difference in criticizing and it's not a thin line. It's not a thin line. It's a wall, okay? There is a difference between criticizing the president and not liking the decisions they do and wanting them to die and threatening them. There's a big difference. And because they are the top of the, like, yeah, of course, that it's like threatening the queen. Like, you don't do that. You don't do that. You don't threaten the top people who are in charge of extremely important stuff. Like, that's just, you don't know.
That's not to say that such speech isn't political. Oh, it is. It's very political. It's just not protected political speech.
Right.
In another case, you're not allowed to defame a person. That's not protected speech either, whether it's libel or slander. If you make some false statements and damage a person's reputation, you're going to be liable for damages.
A lot of tabloids get into trouble for that.
You're going to be paying some money. Yeah.
I want to know how tabloids actually are able to continue going, because there's a lot of tabloids who do. That's their, like.
Well, there was a case called the New York Times v. Sullivan back in the 60s.
Okay.
And it ruled that in order for a libel or a slander case to go forward against the press or an agent of the press, which a tabloid is,
Mm-hmm.
you have to find that there is malice with
So
that
ill
statement.
intent. So
Right.
how would you do
It's
that?
a hard to prove because they can say, I got this statement from a confidential informant. I
But
can't reveal my sources.
by printing it, is it not malice because you?
No, because it is their job to report news.
Is it a matter of intent versus like you have? Wow, that's
So you would need some kind of correspondence or an email that says, "Hey, I'm going to put this in my article because I really want to hurt Hillary Clinton's chances of becoming president, or I really want to hurt Jeb Bush's chance of beating Trump in the primary," for example. You'd need something like that.
You have to prove that was their intention.
Yes.
That is very difficult to prove. Has that even been a thing that could has that? Are there any cases where they have been able to prove that?
I believe there has been some over the years, mainly involving celebrities.
Right.
And made up stories.
Wow.
And they've been able to prove it. But generally, when it comes to political things, I don't believe they've been able to successfully sue on defamation with a political person.
Interesting. Huh.
Now, someone out in the audience may know of a case where that happened. I do not.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So we've covered defamation, threats,
Yeah.
And as far as threats go, you can say something like, I'm going to kill you if you don't give me your money. That is an assault, and that is not protected.
Okay. So
because if you really think the person's going to kill you, he doesn't have to kill you. He doesn't have to touch you. The minute you say that, you've been assaulted.
So assault doesn't mean physical. Doesn't necessarily mean physical.
No.
Really?
Battery is physical.
So basically just intimidating them is assault.
Correct.
I didn't know that. Remus, shut up.
That's why you have an assault charge and a battery charge. And they usually follow one another. Usually there's an assault.
They've been charged with assault and battery.
Right.
Oh.
That's two different crimes, not one.
I didn't know that. That is fascinating. Okay. Wow. So someone could be charged with just assault.
Yes.
Can you be charged with just a battery? With just battery?
Yeah.
Or
yeah, and I'll give you an example of that.
Mm-hmm.
A poor Asian American is walking down the street in New York. Someone comes up behind him and clocks him in the head. He never sees him. He never feels threatened. So he can't be assaulted.
But so many people
he was definitely battered.
But so many people associate that being assault because you harmed them. That's wow. That's actually really wow. I didn't even realize, because I would look at that and think that that's assault, but assault is not physical. Battery is the physical part of that.
Correct.
Wow. Okay. Man. Holy crap. And that has happened in New York to like a little old grandma, a little old Asian grandma. Gasian.
God, it happened to Rick Moranis.
It did happen to Rick Moranis. That dude, that's right. Dude just comes up and clocks the dude. And that's like one of the nicest guys to ever exist in the world. Who wants to punch that dude in the face? Like, yeah, that actually happens a lot. Sadly enough. Okay. So, what is this fighting? So looking at your notes, the fighting face-to-face personal insults that are likely to lead to immediate fight are punishable. So, but it doesn't include political statements that offend others and provoke them to violence. Okay, can you explain that?
Right. If I went up to a congressman, or some government person, cop even, and said, "You're a dick," that's a personal insult.
Absolutely.
He may want to hit me upside the head. If he hits me upside the head, I don't have any recourse to that.
What does that mean?
If I were to sue him for damages for him hitting me,
you have no rights.
I would lose because I insulted him. I gave him the insult. The insult was so egregious that he just reacted by hitting me.
That would kind of be okay. So he'd be defending himself essentially.
Yeah.
But it would be like it'd have to be a really bad insult. Like calling someone a dick is not enough to hit. Is not enough to warrant a hit.
Community standards, but yeah.
Interesting. So what about
But if you did a political statement that way that offended somebody and provoked them to hit you or whatever, like you're a creepy, dip-headed Nazi fascist stormtrooper. I can't think of a good political insult.
Well, what about I see anti-abortion protesters down here. Okay, so what if like you are a woman going in to get an abortion and you have an anti-abortionist calling them terrible names and making them feel so and just belittling them to the point in which their response is to punch them in the face because you're already at a vulnerable spot when you have to go into that clinic. They have that response is not, they can get away with that.
Yeah, they could.
That's messed up. Because you're already at a heightened emotional state walking into, Planned Parenthood or any abortion clinic that any clinic that will provide abortions, and having anti-abortionists standing outside. I mean, I've seen videos of they're aggressive with their chanting and just. I mean, there was one video I saw where the head of this clinic walked out and like she was just being harassed by the anti-abortionist, and she's just like, I know that what I do is help people. What are you doing? Right? Like that was her. Good on her for how she handled it. Like, holy cow. But if I had to endure that every day, at some point, I don't know what I would do. Honest to God. I would want to punch somebody. I'm not going to lie. And if I am in that state,
in trouble for it.
Yeah, and if I'm in that state and I need to have an abortion for whatever reason, and I walk in and I have these people just calling me like a killer, and just because you already feel awful for having to make this decision. You do feel like a killer when you make those decisions. It's not an easy decision to make. And to have somebody in your face saying all of this stuff, I can understand someone wanting to punch them in the face.
Yeah.
And they can get away with it. That is so much emotional distress right there. That is so messed up, in my opinion. Wow.
The freedom of speech gives somebody the right, basically, to say political things that other people are going to hate. And
I mean, it doesn't give them the right to get up. It doesn't give them the right to get up in your face, but
no, because at some point you don't have the right to assault people.
Right. It just that right there kind of bothers me. That anti-abortion protest thing, because they love to protest outside of the clinics. That actually bothers me a bit, that they can do that and get away with it, and they have no consequences. And I feel like there should be consequences to their actions, especially surrounding something that is so emotional and so draining. That I feel like you're not really thinking about the things that wow. That's sad. There are some situations where I feel like maybe you should have a little bit more what's the word I'm looking for? Crass, or a little bit more tact. You should have a little bit more tact when it comes to some of that stuff, you know?
You can't legislate tact.
I know. That's unfortunate. So moving on.
Next we have obscenity.
Mm-hmm.
You can't restrict speech that is obscene.
You can?
Yeah, and that's usually...
Okay, I'm sorry. When you say can and can't, they sound the same sometimes, so I have to get you to...
Yes, you can restrict obscenity.
Okay.
Now the question is, what is obscenity? And the classic response was, I believe the Supreme Court's justice says, I know it when I see it.
That's so subjective. That's so subjective.
And so the Supreme Court in Miller v. California at 73, where they said it's not protected by the First Amendment, they did not give a definition of obscenity. What they did was give a test of community standards.
But, I mean, that's based off of those standards change. Community standards change. Society changes. Like,
so what you had was basically a porno magazine that is not obscene in the community, say in Hollywood, would be obscene in, say, Fayetteville, Georgia.
Right.
And it just became a total mess. And so in practice, there's rarely any kind of prosecution for obscenity. And those that have gone on just on an obscenity charge have gotten a not guilty verdict.
So, highly sexually explicit pornography is not protected, is what this says. So, if you are, say, you're having sex outside of the courtroom,
yeah,
and it is a political thing, you could get away with that?
I don't think that's ever been tested.
Someone who is okay with this, I'd like to see you test that out. I want to see that tested out. I do.
Because one, you'd have to
bail.
the district attorney would have to say that human sex is obscene, and that would be your community standard.
But sex isn't obscene. That's the thing.
Right.
It's not.
So the obscenity
it's a
would have to
perfectly
be in the.
natural thing.
Then they'd have to bring in that it's not obscene in private; it's obscene in public.
Is it though? I mean, it's a natural thing for people.
Children can see it.
Okay, teach your kids about sex. I mean, I'm sorry. Like as someone who used to be very like closed off, grew up in a very conservative home. I know, I understand. And yes, I absolutely agree. There's a place and time for everything. However, sex and pornography is not as bad. It is considered bad because the Christian religion made it bad. Purity culture made it bad. But even God, like if you actually read the Bible, there's only a few things that God doesn't like, and it's pedophilia.
Getting onto that next, but I will say,
I mean,
that if you really wanted to test it out, you could go and have public sex on in a park or something.
I mean, no joke. Think about it, especially when it comes to LGBT rights. I would love to see some gay sex on the steps of the Capitol building. In protest to LGBT rights, especially trans rights, being thrown out.
I'm just kind of picturing that right now on the Capitol steps, and
right. I want to see that get prosecuted. I want to see that get prosecuted. Come on. That'd be way better than watching a bunch of white people go in and kill cops and stuff. Come on. Is it obscene?
No.
Let's find out. Who's with me? Come on.
Now, I will say, if you really wanted to test it, you could have a religious belief that sex is natural and sex anywhere is natural. And you have the religious freedom, therefore, because they're big on religious freedom currently.
You know, there are people whose kinks are exhibitionism. So you just got to get one of those, just got to get a couple of those people and convince them. I'm sorry. I condone safe sex. Okay. I condone safe sex. So, but that is interesting that I'm actually surprised nobody has tried that. I'm actually surprised nobody has tried that. And my next question is violence. So what if you showed extreme gore and violence as a political thing? Because in this country, violence is not as bad as porn. Violence isn't as bad as sex, but they're on the same spectrum. They're just two ends of the spectrum if you think about it.
That's what the whole movie rating system is about.
Right. So like would it be based off of that? Like can you go over the top with that on the steps of the Capitol building? Hush, you're not dying.
There have been movies that were banned due to gore and violence. In addition, there have been others that were banned because of sex.
I know that Europe, the violence thing is a little bit more of a no-no than the sex thing. They're a bit more open with the sex stuff than they are with the violence and gore. And the violence and gore tends to be more cinema verite stuff. Like I've seen some French films that really like they outdo American films, and it's just like
some Italian horror films of the 70s were explicitly gory and violent.
Mm-hmm.
They just weren't well acted.
I'm personally not a fan, but interesting. So
But they'd have to be prosecuted on the obscenity charge.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. Like,
and I don't think you've
what is obscene when it comes to violence?
I don't think you've had an obscenity charge brought against a movie maker since the 70s with Cannibal Holocaust, possibly, where things were so realistic they thought it was a snuff film.
Really?
But yeah, at least I think it was Cannibal Holocaust. It's a classic.
For those of you who are not aware, a snuff film is a movie showing someone actually dying, showing an actual murder.
Right. Well, a movie that is produced solely to show that murder.
Yeah.
If you happen to capture a murder on film, you can't show that.
You can or you can't?
You can. There's been documentaries of people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can show that. It just can't be the reason that it exists.
Right. But a snuff film is the reason that it exists. Like,
yeah.
The whole, yeah, it's.
And the FBI will tell you that there's no such thing as a snuff film.
There is.
But there is.
There is. No, they're not. You don't want to get into. No, they're not. They're very messed. It's some messed up. And that concludes part 1 of our deep dive into the First Amendment. Did I say part 1 or part 2? I meant part 1. Part 2 is coming up. It should be available right now. So go ahead and listen to it. I'm just going to go with this. Thank you so much for listening to Learning the Law. I've recorded this so many times. We're just going to, this is it. This is the final recording. If you like this podcast and want to hear more, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share in all your favorite places. You can find it hosted on Twitch at twitch.tv/PhoenixNymphy. Use the hashtag Learning the Law on all social media to follow more there. You can find Ron on Twitter at Necrokijo. That's NECROKIJO. And me on most social media platforms at Phoenix Nymphy. If you have any questions, please tweet, comment, or email at twolazydogsmedia@gmail.com. This has been a Two Lazy Dogs production.